I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's block we call A Block of Brooks. Brooks, Brooks, and more Brooks abound as the Grindhouse Institute takes an in-depth look at the works of three comedic geniuses who have made a name, the same name, for themselves, creating some of the most iconic film and television shows. Mel Brooks, the indisputable master of the parody film, Albert Brooks, the multi-hyphenate writer, actor, comedian, director, who stars in not one, but two of the films we're talking about today, and James L. Brooks, creator of such beloved comedies as The Mary Tyler Moore Show, Taxi, The Critic, and Terms of Endearment. Not a bad block of Brooks. The past haunts Dr. Frederick Frankenstein, a medical lecturer who inherits his grandfather's Transylvanian castle, as well as his mania for reanimating dead tissue. Gene Wilder is at his Gene Wildest in Mel Brooks' 1974 classic, Young Frankenstein. Middle-aged yuppies David and Linda Howard quit their jobs, liquidate their life savings, and buy a Winnebago to start their lives over on the road. You know, just like an Easy Rider. With their first stop being Las Vegas and their entire nest egg in cash, what could possibly go wrong? Julie Haggerty stars along with Albert Brooks, who also co-wrote and directed the 1985 film Lost in America. Homer Simpson and his new pet Spider Pig do everything that a Spider Pig does to exacerbate an environmental disaster that endangers the town of Springfield, as well as the rest of the world. Luckily, Russ Cargill and President Schwarzenegger are there to order a dome be placed over Springfield, trapping her citizens within. James L. Brooks wrote and produced the Simpsons movie from 2007. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
Pollution in Springfield has reached crisis levels.
Ugh, I hate this job.
I've narrowed your choices down to 5 unthinkable options. Each will cause untold misery.
I picked number 3.
You don't even want to read them first?
I was elected to lead, not to read. Number 3.
Welcome back to the Grindhouse Institute. I'm Brian Foster. With me, as always, is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you?
God, what do I say? What do I say? How do I do this?
So much pressure. Doing all right?
Yeah. This time.
We are here for another episode today. This time, again, we are doing some comedies, which is really exciting. It's been a lot of horror on this show, and the last few we've done some comedies, so it's been very refreshing. And we have a very special guest with us today on this episode. Jeremy, would you like to do the intro?
Yeah. Luckily, we finally figured out a good block and we've been trying to get this guy on for a while. It's a mutual friend of ours, a comedian and a really funny guy, Sam Kimbrell.
Hey folks, that's my intro. I'm really happy to be here. They brought me on because it's sort of a Make-A-Wish thing. They don't actually want me to discuss movies.
This checks a box for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, they need financing, charity financing, and they got it for the show because they brought on a small child to discuss movies he likes, like The Simpsons.
Yeah.
Well, since you want to intro the movies that we're watching today, Sam, why don't you go ahead and do that?
Yeah, so we're going to be discussing the films of Mel Brooks, or the films of Brooks, and Brooks. That I already fucked up. So Brooks, and Brooks. We have Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein. We have Albert Brooks's Lost in America. And we have James L. Brooks's producing work, but essentially, he's been on The Simpsons for a while, The Simpsons movie. So essentially we're doing Brooks, and Brooks.
We'll give you a pass on the Simpsons Brooks just because it makes sense, but yeah, we get it. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. We were going to do Terms of Endearment, but yeah.
Look, it's just a way to cheat to get the entire TV series into this thing as a movie.
Yeah, from what it seems, we're already going to try to do a mini series on this show with 2 other films. So I'm glad we're not doing a series of the Simpsons.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so this was, again, super fun to revisit some of these films. I had seen all of them. I hadn't seen the Simpsons movie since it first came out, and honestly, the one I've seen the most out of these, and most recently, was Young Frankenstein. But again, every time I watch that thing, new parts pop up, and the same parts still make me laugh. So Thanks for bringing these.
Yeah, and I think that they're, not only are they classics for, film nerds like us, but they're also fun to watch with other people that aren't film nerds. Like, they're just great, fun movies. They're great films in and of themselves, and they're really interesting to kind of like dive into from like just a sort of analysis perspective.
Yeah, before watching it for the show, I saw Young Frankenstein at the Forever Cemetery during a summer programming that they did, and it was just a bunch of people saying all the lines like during the movie, laughing at all the right parts. It was a great group movie to see.
One of the things I like about, especially with like Young Frankenstein or any comedy movie, like when you watch them with other people, like there's some like classic things everybody kind of remembers and like recites literally out loud when the movie's playing. There's like some small moments where like, oh, I didn't find that funny when I saw it, but the fact that it was called out by somebody, it meant something to them. And that's the experience of watching, especially comedies together in a group. I definitely had that experience with Young Frankenstein. I watched it at a cemetery as well. And another Mel Brooks film, Blazing Saddles. Like, there's so many different small moments from actors making choices and small different things that you just remember that are funny to you. And that's what makes, I think, a great comedy is those small moments.
And Gene Wilder, Young Frankenstein, is basically nonstop funny, too. I mean, it's just every scene that he's in, it's just you have to just pay attention to him, and you'll miss everybody in the scene because he's doing such outrageous shit.
No, for sure. And I mean, this is his probably he's at his most Gene Wilder. He's at his most Gene Wildest in this one. It's he's got everything that you always kind of laugh at with him, but he cranks it up a notch even further. It's like his screaming and his like really low pitched moments that are really quiet, and then he starts screaming.
His delays on everything, the looks that he gives. Like when the inspector starts throwing those darts at the wall, and he just turns and like spits water out of his mouth. Nice grouping. It's really like idiotic.
Exactly.
It's crazy because it's not that he's playing it overly comedic, it's that he's playing it way too serious, and that's what makes it so funny. Right. And I think that's like what's kind of like we kind of miss from certain comedy movies these days, where it's like we don't have that just pure acting performance where it's just like he's really Dr. Frankenstein here. He's really this character. You definitely see some dry, real moments from like a Nathan Fielder, but I would say like there isn't that sort of, I don't know how to explain it. It's just like a real pure acting choice to play it very, very serious. He's not hamming it up, but then sometimes when he plays it overly serious, it feels like he's hamming it up. It's hard to explain, but it's definitely admirable from like an acting perspective.
And both live action movies that we're watching, like
exactly,
have that. In this block where it's like Albert Brooks certainly, and
that dude can get set off.
Everyone in that movie, like they were all playing it kind of straight. I don't know how to describe why was it that it was just funny, but everything was played so straight in Lost in America. But they definitely were. They weren't winking at the camera that they're making jokes right now.
I think the thing is with Lost in America is it's just great scene work from a writing perspective and an acting choice perspective. The camera doesn't really get in the way of anything. And one of the things we had talked about as well is like the scene work hits a certain point where you think this scene is over, but Albert Brooks finds a way to comedically explore it and find out, like, to flip whose scene it is, because sometimes you can point to a scene like, oh, that's his scene, that's her scene, but especially like the scene where they're breaking up in the RV, you think it's his scene, he's blowing up at her for losing all the money, but then it really becomes her scene because she literally just says, fuck you, I'm leaving. She just says, I'm leaving, then it becomes her scene, but it's still the same, scene. And that's what I think is what makes a great comedy, what makes a great improv scene, what makes a great sketch is that it hits a point where you think it can't go on any further, then it hits another note and becomes something even better. And I think that's really tough to write, really tough to direct, and especially tough to perform because they're bouncing off each other.
And Albert Brooks is doing all of those things.
Yeah, he really is. It's no wonder that he kind of stopped doing it. He kind of got sick of the sort of the Hollywood filmmaking of it all. There's certainly a story I shared with you guys where he kind of like blew up on Peter Chernin of all people about the ending of The Scout. Like, I can understand that because his movies, if done incorrectly, are bad studio comedies. The way that they're sort of written, they have to be played serious and straight up, and they have to be directed very grounded. And I think that, if you read that on the page, in the wrong hands, you're basically watching a bad studio comedy.
Right. Interesting.
And some of his best movies he co-wrote with another lady by the name of Monica Johnson, who also, was a writer with him on Saturday Night Live. So I think like all of the filmmakers today have this sort of connection back to television comedy, to sketch comedy, to writing for stand-ups. Albert Brooks was a part of that sort of new wave of 70s, 80s stand-ups like Steve Martin that was like really experimental. And I think that sort of shows in the writing that, it's kind of fun and refreshing to see. And I Lost in America is great for if you're like just jumping into Albert Brooks. I think there's some other choices you could make that you're like, that was a little bit too extreme on the philosophy for me, but I feel like Lost in America is definitely very applicable to a lot of folks these days as they're like trying to essentially explore who they are as adults now. And the idea of like dropping out, but then dropping back in within probably a week and a half is really funny. The idea that they base their weekend, they basically based their life off of a movie that was an idea that didn't work, and the idea that the police officer liked that movie but for the wrong reasons.
Exactly. That did get them off the ticket, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that type of like looking inward is definitely something you would probably see in like an HBO type of series, but you wouldn't necessarily see in a movie these days, which is so strange to see like in movie form.
I guess that's the other thing about Lost in America. We should go back to Young Frankenstein in a minute, but like that's the other thing about Lost in America, where it's like, as biting of a satire as it was in 1985, it was hitting pretty close to home here. All the things he was satirizing are just like the reality now. It's just like, the lowered expectations of, I'm going to be assistant manager now at the Wiener Schnitzel, okay? Or Der Wiener Schnitzel, or whatever they call it. Der Wiener Schnitzel.
With her boss that was half her age.
Where does the bathroom go?
16-year-old.
Looking at these fries, they're still cold on the inside.
Skip, these fries are frozen.
You were eating them frozen, huh?
What do you want me to do?
But I mean, there's something so depressing about like the movie, just as a concept, like them being so miserable that they want to give up and just like set out and like and unplug from all of their misery. And how Julie Haggerty has no boss, and she has no one to go to, and all this stuff. It's like
real job. Like it's a weird office. She's in like a weird void of nothing. Like one window that goes into more office. Like there's no life around her.
But the idea of like not being able to do the storming and like just quit or whatever. It's like I don't have a boss to quit to.
Because Albert Brooks got to do that. He had that opportunity to have that extreme blowout situation where he quits, and the way that he tells the New York guy to basically fuck off every time he tries to talk and cut in. It was brilliant. Then to meet up with him at the end again and almost chase him down in the middle of the street, scare the hell out of the guy. That's awesome.
He's trying to tackle him or whatever.
He's like giving him a hug, like running in.
No, but it's like, there's something like just so like very, very poignant about our moment or whatever, about like, just like the you don't have that sort of like the boss to tell off in that same way, and it's like especially now with like our telecommuting situations, and then in the end these guys are like trapped. They have to go back to this like hellscape or whatever. It's just like they have to eat the shit.
I think that could be one of the best lines. One of the best lines before the ending of a movie, where it's just like, these characters are heroes, but like they're miserable because they didn't get the job they want. They're kind of miserable because the house is kind of not working out to their liking. Like their misery is totally self-inflicted in this like Reagan era, like, and it, like
kind of. They owned a house in L.A.
Those are the ways in which they're able to express their sort of depression and dissatisfaction with some of these things, but it seems like it just has to do with like being caught in this this world, and it's like caring about things that you shouldn't care about, which is like, oh, did I get this title, a meaningless title to my job or whatever. It's like no, you'll get paid more doing this other thing. It's like all these little things that like
Phil Shabano is the groom.
and like caring about this house versus that house, and like the tile versus this thing, and like the things that were like driving them insane were all of those meaningless things that were causing them so much stress in their lives. And then, the fact that they had to eat the shit and go back to a world where they care about that stuff is so depressing. It's just, for a comedy, it's like super depressing.
Yeah, because they can't exist without their possessions and like capitalism and like consumerism. Like they literally try to ask for corporate jobs in this world. And, do you have anything in your executive suite to like this small town job recruiter guy?
Is asking for $100K a year job.
In 1985 or whatever, yeah.
Do you have anything at all? Can you rack your brain? Something maybe in the executive file, or maybe you have a white collar box or something?
Oh, I know. You mean the $100,000 box.
The crossing guard, you're not going to want that job.
You see, the base salary was $75, but then there were bonus opportunities. Like, those little specific details are so applicable now, but so brilliant as well. Or just like, he went back to New York at 30% less, salary, but with better benefits. And that's our ending title. It's not like, and they lived happily ever after. No. It's just, they continued in hell.
They ate shit happily ever after.
Yeah. I think that movie is definitely very applicable now, and I think relating it even back to The Simpsons, if we think about when Homer Simpson was, when the series first came out, Homer Simpson was kind of like a lower middle class type of dad in his 30s, and now he's a successful boomer if we really look at it. He's like, he's got a house, kids, grandkids, like or not grandkids, but you kind of get the idea that like he's a boomer now. He's very well off because he owned that house, but like before,
a house and kids. That's
he had a job where he wasn't trained for it, but then became trained for it. Like he worked at a nuclear power plant. Like,
right. And somehow it's unskilled labor.
Yeah. Well, the thing is like it definitely, like with going back to Lost in America, it's like it's applicable to people now, especially, but in a different way, in kind of depressing way. And I guess what's good is that we have Young Frankenstein and the Simpsons movie on our list to get us away from the depressing stuff right now.
True. Yeah. That's a good point. I did want to bring up though, because you brought it up, Jeremy, earlier, was that to not have a boss to quit to. And thinking about the situation that we're in right now, even if I wanted to do something super dramatic and really throw down the gauntlet inside an office, I don't have that opportunity now. What am I going to do? Move my mic away and take off my headphones real violently? It doesn't really do anything. But yeah,
you can quit via text.
Yeah, text. It's going to be a text. Anticlimactic.
Also, like your reputation on like LinkedIn and Twitter, if you like went on like a spree, like a blow up like that, like. You will not believe what happened in my office these days.
That's exactly
some guy
where that blow up needs to happen, is right on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Oh God, I would love to just go all in on LinkedIn blow-ups. Honestly, that might be a market you want to court now, because social media platforms are so hard to master if you're starting out. Just go on LinkedIn and just start bashing people. Like, ruin that platform. Don't actually go on there and try to like post meaningful articles or try to network. Yeah. Go up there and blow up and ask your old employer for your time back, and ask specifically for the clock behind him, and let him know that the hairpiece secret is off. Like, let him know that on LinkedIn.
I think you've done it. I think you've modernized Lost in America.
Yeah, there we go. It doesn't need much modernizing. It definitely, there is a part where, for me, it's like, it would be nice to drop out, be like, I am such a fucking wiener. Like, it's like, I'm a screenwriter. Yeah, it's like, screenwriting major, what am I going to do out there? I'm going to go out and drop out? Like, how? The cocaine was the nest egg.
You don't have the nest egg?
They had the cocaine. Him screaming that at her from behind is really reached like
right.
The cocaine.
That was the nest egg.
Oh, you're basing your whole life on Easy Rider. They had nothing. They had no nest egg.
Bullshit! They had a giant nest egg. They had all this cocaine.
Well, you said you were wanted to bring up Young Frankenstein, the master of the parody, Mel Brooks. The three of us all worked next to Mel Brooks for several years, so this is kind of close to home, I guess, other than the fact that we've all probably watched their movies since we were 3.
True story, I was out taking a phone call once at our old office, and I was just standing in that spot, literally like a Toyota hybrid RAV4 pulled up to the spot.
Highlander.
Yeah, he pulled up in that car like almost every week. I mean, he definitely came to his office, and I got to meet him that way. I know
on the nose every morning he was there.
I know people definitely would ask him for autographs, and he never hesitated to sign or like take pictures. He loved it all. He loved being. There's actually a documentary on him. And it takes place in that office. It's up on HBO. It's pretty great. So, yeah.
Because I think a lot of the work he was doing was for Max, his son, to get, his books pushed through movie deals and things like that, and also get new publishing done. But this, in my opinion, you were talking about how Lost in America is kind of an easy entry level into Albert Brooks. I think Young Frankenstein is the easy entry level into Mel Brooks, too. And I think that the fact that this movie is based on, Frankenstein, the gothic horror, it's shot just like it and everything, but people can always like latch on to horror, I think, or at least like classic horror, things like that. And not to mention, it's one of my favorites. It's probably my favorite from him.
Spaceballs?
You like Spaceballs?
Yeah, Spaceballs is a good entry one.
Probably. I mean, I think there's also a nostalgia value there too, where it's like watch that one more.
Yeah, definitely don't start out with Blazing Saddles right off the bat.
Yeah. Right.
Slightly tangential, but kind of on point. I had once at my current job showed a clip from Glengarry Glen Ross as a joke because we had a competition. I was like, "Oh, second place, you get a set of steak knives," and they're like, "Well, what is that from?" And then I showed them the clip. And the amount of expletives and like homophobic slurs that are just like dished out in that monologue, and they're like, "Really? You're gonna fire us?" I don't know. So it's like, there's like got to be some context. Like we're movie people, so like we like the wolf monologue in Pulp Fiction type things, where it's like, if I'm Kurt, it's because time is of the essence. So please clean the fucking car. Like that type of stuff is like
pretty pleasing with cherry on top.
Yeah, so fucking car. Yeah, exactly. So like that type of stuff is so off-putting to younger people who are just busting their hump to try and make a living. Yeah,
we just watched and talked about Reservoir Dogs, and I forgot how bad that gets dialogue wise. I mean, there's no way that quoting that now. But again, like the broad strokes of these movies are hilarious, and these are quotable lines, like from Glengarry Glen Ross, from Reservoir Dogs, from Young Frankenstein. I'm sure that there's a little bit that's. Especially when they talk about, Frankenstein or the monsters, his well-endowedness and things like that. There's a lot of like...
Schwanstucker.
Schwanstucker. Well, that goes without saying.
He's going to be very popular.
They also do a great job of kind of wiring in some really stupid juvenile jokes, like the poopy undies stuff. He was my boyfriend type of thing. There is some like great jokes, but they don't overly do it with that. And I think that is definitely very, clear in something like a Scary Movie, which is obviously a classic for different reasons, for different folks. But like, I feel like with Young Frankenstein, you believe that this could slightly have happened in a book. Like it feels realistic to a certain degree, as much as Frankenstein will be.
I mean, is that because of how well done it's produced and the cinematics and it's such a beautiful looking film, and for being a comedy that needs to focus on visual gags, it does it in such a beautiful frame.
Which
is such like a rare thing for Mel Brooks. I mean, it's like the cinematic part of his body of work is usually like a lot more utilitarian. And in this one, he actually, it is outside of his usual bag of tricks or whatever, because he does like focus on like the look of it, and that music that's really great, and the camera moves that also spell out the jokes and everything else. I mean, it's like
exactly.
And maybe this is I'm only thinking of maybe his latter films of like the Robin Hood and the Dracula one, where the
Dead and Loving It
just sits there, waiting for Leslie Nielsen or whoever to do their thing. Yeah. Renfield, I don't care.
There's a pretty great gag in Silent Movie with "There's a fly in my soup" when the giant Fly lands in the soup. I mean, there are some great TV visual gags. They're not like, cinematic. Yeah.
What I mean is, like, there's always just like a wide,
sure,
two-shot capture and everything, as opposed to having a lot of those gags come from placing the camera in a way, or beautiful lighting, or this or that, right? The sort of the cinema part of it.
I thought the shots in the shots in the graveyard were quite masterful. The two shot of he and Igor that had dug themselves a hole already, and they're ready to get it out, and he's like, "What a dirty job! This could be worse. Could be raining."
Well, even just the shot of the heads, the brains.
Oh yeah. Like the progress of the fresh bodies.
God, I love that.
Yeah.
Marty Feldman, I'm not sure I'd have been able to act with that guy with that just breaking character every single time. Like, just the things that he would say and the movements he had.
Damn your eyes!
Dude,
There's a certain anarchaic nature of his character in this movie that he doesn't really have to follow the rules of the world between his hump, changing sides and turning to the camera. Yeah.
What hump?
Yeah, it's really great. And I didn't appreciate that as much as I was when I was younger, when you first watch it. I feel like when you first watch it, you're like, oh, it's Willy Wonka. Like, that's why I'm going to watch this. I love Gene Wilder. And then you watch it, and then it's something way more than that every time you watch that. It's so layered and layered and layered. That
feels like a Mel Brooks joke, those repeated, that hump's on the other side. What hump? They did that again in Robin Hood. I think that was the other thing. But another one is that when he puts his hand on the hump, it sounds like they clump wood together. Like, it's a really odd sound effect. It was like hollow. Like as if it was like a hollow ball on his back. Yeah. I thought that was great.
I think the thing is with that movie, it's so, like I said, it's so layered, but then the acting choices of every individual, and I think that's what makes a great improv, long form improv show, is that everybody kind of takes care of themselves character-wise, but they do a good job of connecting themselves to the others. Like Frau Bucher, or the Dr. Frankenstein. Everybody feels like they're in this world, being a big character, but also working with others to kind of comedically heighten each other, which is super hard to do on a film shoot, especially.
That's where Madeline Kahn comes through like a champion, and she is, when she pops in there and she won't let him kiss him or touch him or anything. The nails. I'm going to a party later, even though he's going away for months. She's concerned about her hair and her makeup.
Taffeta, darling. The dress is taffeta. It wrinkles so easily.
Oh. It's so clear what every character's motivation is in every single one of it. The scenes. It's so silly and so ridiculous. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to write. So it's definitely something to study for sure.
There's that horrid man again. Oh, hurry now, before I make a fool of myself.
So Young Frankenstein, obviously, we just talked about how, it's a great, piece that showcases character motivation. It also shows great parody directing and cinematography. But I think, over the course of time, I think, people have watched, the work of Mel Brooks and definitely felt motivated to create sort of comedy. There's a reason why we're talking about Mel Brooks today and not someone else. And that, parody movie making, essentially, he's the master of it, comedy, parody, filmmaking. And that in sketch comedy is what's called sort of like a mapping sketch. You map over something, or you're parodying a movie. And I think it's definitely something worth going back and reviewing, because it feels very pure to the book. The only thing that doesn't sort of feel pure to the story is one of the funniest moments in the entire movie, which is the putting on the Ritz scene, which apparently is the only argument Gene Wilder ever had with Mel Brooks was about that scene, because Mel Brooks didn't want it in the movie. He thought it would ruin it, of all things, which, by the way, in High Anxiety, he breaks into song as well with the actual song title.
Yeah. so break into song in Blazing Saddles.
Multiple times.
Right, yeah, I was gonna... Also, they kind of have a similar gag. I mean, I feel like the putting on the Ritz scene in Young Frankenstein feels like the campfire farting scene in Blazing Saddles. It's that one moment that everyone's going to be repeating after the movie.
I love how he feeds the monster like an animal trainer or something.
He puts it right in his pops in his... Also, that just reminds me of that first scene with that old guy that he had in that was teaching about the reflexes when he put the clamp on his back, and as he leaves because he kicked him in the nuts so hard, and he's like, "Give him another $1." Just those are the small things I think you're talking about, Sam. Those little
exactly. Going back to even Mel Brooks' sort of purity to like parody filmmaking, like he even worked with Alfred Hitchcock on High Anxiety, like mastering how to really parody the movie. And I think it's just staying true to shots and then just flipping it on its head, going to like Blazing Saddles, just pulling back and showing that it's a fucking movie and that everybody's going to run off the set at the very end is so ridiculous.
We pulled the rug out from everybody at the end of Blazing Saddles.
So, I mean, like, even Young Frankenstein at the end, even Young Frankenstein at the very end, it's like, it's basically pulling out the idea that this is like a horror movie. It's like, he's married to Madeline Kahn now, he's got Poopy Undies hamper, and then, Gene Wilder's, they've resorted to like, monogamy.
Honey, did you see? I put a special hamper in the bathroom just for your shirts, and the other one is just for socks and poo-poo undies. So
silly. They actually shot the movie in color, too. Like, they actually shot it on a color print because the studio didn't trust them to shoot it in black and white. So if you have the DVD box for Young Frankenstein, there's color images for some reason, even on the DVD box. Of like Peter Boyle is literally blue. He's blue. It looks bizarre. Imagine Young Frankenstein if you saw Peter Boyle as blue. Like, it wouldn't fit that idea of true parody. And I think it's what makes it so funny. And I don't know, even just the bits back to the book or the original movie of the little girl at the well getting launched back into her room. That's a great the anatomy of a bit type of moment where you could show to screenwriting or comedy students where it's just it's parodying something very specific, but then it's how do we get her back in the room in a funny way? And it's super amazing.
And then Gene Hackman making an appearance.
Oh yeah,
probably the best cameo of of that time. That was him being the funniest I've ever seen Gene Hackman. I guess he was pretty funny in the Tenenbaums.
Oh yeah,
this one he was more slapsticky funny,
Very good. Make espresso.
Fire is good. Fire is our friend.
It's funny that you're talking about the mapping thing, and it's this movie does it so well because it takes that subject matter sort of seriously. It takes it has everybody kind of play it straight, I guess, to a degree. But there's at least sort of an internal logic that they adhere to most of the time with those characters, as opposed to other sort of parody movies, like some of the scary movies, for instance, like that kind of thing, where it's just the characters don't mean anything. It's just gag after gag, and then it's loosely strung together.
Yeah, like having Videodrome guy just taking a shit and flies all over his face type thing.
Did you call James Woods the Videodrome guy?
Yeah.
Do you feel me from right now? Did you feel me in the pit of your stomach?
Can you feel me look into your heart? Can you feel me in the pit of your stomach?
It's my best James Woods from Casino.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Are we doing an impressions episode now?
Oh, yeah.
We try to throw them in once in a while. Yeah. If we really suck at them, one of the editors, who's ever editing this, will definitely throw in the actual line from the movie.
Good.
See, I nailed it just perfectly. It's exactly his voice.
Ginger, it means he's sitting by the phone like a dumbbell.
Without some of those character things, you can't hold somebody's attention for very long. It's fine in short form and short films or just comedy sketches or Funny or Die or SNL, that kind of thing. But all of a sudden you try to make that last for an hour and a half, and you can't kind of keep the ball in the air without something holding you there with the story.
Yeah, I think there's a clear character motivation from Gene Wilder in this, and it kind of strings it together. And I think, as silly as this sounds, there's the internal conflict of not wanting to be what your parent is. I mean, it really is a true motivation for an actor. It's not just kind of silly poopy pee-pee type of stuff.
But doesn't that also relate to what we were talking about with Gothic horror and how that's written? Is the old horror, the horror from the past, comes back to repeat itself? And
it's totally following that. Yeah, exactly.
He's trying to remove this grandfather, who's not following in his grandfather's footsteps.
Yeah.
There's also the bed scene, the destiny.
Anything else you wanted to say about Young Frankenstein, Sam?
No, I think we hit a lot, right? And I feel like a lot of people like it for a variety of reasons. I think one of the things that we're missing definitely is like watching with people, watching it in a group is definitely is sorely missed with this particular movie, especially. I think the other ones you can watch on your own. But Mel Brooks movies, like I watched Blazing Saddles at the New Bev, which is Quentin Tarantino's movie theater. It was amazing because it wasn't just people, it was like belly laughing. Like it was great, and it was the right crowd that would appreciate it and not get too offended by a lot of things in that.
By the whole thing?
There's a lot in there. Yeah, there's
yes.
No, but you're right. I mean, laughter is infectious, and the energy in the room. Everybody's feeding off each other. Like you were saying, like things you didn't notice or wouldn't laugh at on your own. All of a sudden, someone else like starts the laughter, and the wave just kind of like ripples throughout the entire theater. And it's like a comedy in a theater. It's like one of the greatest sort of arguments. That perhaps Christopher Nolan or somebody who is wanting to preserve theaters should be making, a counter to the sort of streaming world.
Yeah, it's not so much about the visual or the sound and the technical aspect of it. It's the community.
Totally.
4 years of film school for this?
So the Simpsons movie. It definitely doesn't really... Okay, so like The Simpsons we grew up with, obviously that's dead and gone. And I would say that if you were watching the show now, or if you started now, you probably wouldn't think the show was you probably wouldn't think it was that bad. It's got to keep up with 30 years of continuity and characters and changing characters, and it's tough. And I think that they bring on new writers to write certain episodes, like Simon Rich. They've even had Nancy Cartwright write an episode. I think they find ways to stay fresh, albeit kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, it feels a little bit more boomery because the writing staff is a little bit older. It doesn't feel like the 30-year-old writer's room that had Conan O'Brien in it as well, that felt fresh and kind of like the best comedy show on TV.
Yeah.
It was like a murderer's row of like people that are basically, so I've been to a couple of table reads and I was there, and you're like looking down the line of all the writers, and you're like, okay, that guy was on the first season of SNL. That's Bob Odenkirk's brother. That's Larry Wilmore's brother. It's like you start going down the line, like, oh, that guy's written on the show for 20 seasons. There's Matt Groening. There's James L. Brooks. Like, it's still being run by comedy geniuses. I would just say that the sentiments are probably a little bit older. And like we grew up with The Simpsons and we have our favorite jokes. So I think the movie is a celebration of a lot of things. I think it was probably pretty tough to write this movie. I know it took like 193 drafts to get where they're at. It was initially greenlit in 1997, and then it was released in, I want to say, like 2007. So it took a while to write.
10 years after.
There were tons of cameos from celebrities that got cut because it was just too long. So I would say it's interesting that like what the final product was. It was a kind of a fun action comedy movie that centers on what James L. Brooks does well, which is taking a pretty small premise and connecting it back to character relationships. And they found in the past that episodes that did well were ones where Homer wasn't crazy violent and crazy outrageous with his decision making. So it does feel a little bit weird to see Homer so much caring about his family, but you need that to pull it through an entire movie because it's not a TV episode. So it's like, those low points where he's kind of left alone kind of reminds you of that like Johnny Cash episode, right? Like where he goes and has that like spirit journey. Like there are parts that are kind of celebrations of older episodes, but then kind of brought together. Yeah. I think it definitely seemed like it was probably a pretty tough task to write that movie, having so much involved. And even the consulting producers and consulting writers involved with it are people that have written 15 seasons on The Simpsons. So I think what came out was perfectly fine. It's the highest grossing PG-13 movie of all time. And I think overall it celebrates fandom. There are jokes I like better than others. I especially like the bomb robot joke at the very end where
that's hilarious.
Just committing suicide.
Breaks under the pressure. Yeah.
Come on, bomb disarming robot. You're our last hope. So much pressure. He'd been talking about it, but I didn't take him seriously.
Oh man, I almost texted you. I was like, "Hey, did you write this?"
Yeah.
It's so you. It's so Sam Kimbrell.
It's a great movie to kind of watch if you're a Simpsons fan. I do like. What's funny is the people I work with are in their early 20s, and they didn't grow up watching The Simpsons. But I think a lot of kids actually are starting to watch The Simpsons now because of like Disney Plus, because of the movie, and it's a different experience and different jokes for them. So I think, you know, it's crazy. It's been on for 30 years, so it's going to have different generations of people, and people that really still love it from start to finish, and people that hate it now, for sure.
But I feel like this movie touched on 30 years of characters too.
Exactly.
A little moment at least, you know. And I think I brought this up before, but when Fat Tony comes out, you know, you can't throw that in there. Okay, well, I'm going to move my bag of leaves over to here.
My yard trimming.
My yard
There's a dead body in there.
I thought that too, until he said yard trimmings. You gotta learn to listen, Lou.
You know, yeah. As someone who was watching it in its sort of like prime years there, where like what is that? You know, season 3 through 8 or 9, and you know, then just sort of losing touch with it over the years when it started to like, you know, not be firing on all cylinders. Coming back to it and watching it in the theater, I remember seeing this and I was like, man, I'm really, really impressed. Like I should probably watch the show again, because it was really, really funny. And you know, okay, it had enough of a story and everything to kind of, you know, take you through everything. And like you were saying, Sam, it's like they had to take Homer a little more seriously because things weren't going to be resolved in the next 18 minutes.
Yeah.
But, you know, the thing that obviously made it work is just that the humor was just like going gangbusters. It was just so hilarious all the way through.
It's also an incredibly beautiful film and animated really well. The animation is incredible. Like it's obviously a step way above what the show is due to time constraints and production, things like that. But I don't know if it's from watching it on Disney Plus, but holy shit, like the 4K of that is just gorgeous. You know, it's like it's a really.
It looks like the hit and run game. Yeah.
I mean, but you do see that when they take a TV show and like make it into a movie, you're like, ooh, wow, they actually have, you know, more than 12 days to put this thing together. And like
exactly. Like even the Itchy and Scratchy at the beginning was like a really awesome Itchy and Scratchy episode when they go into meta and they're like, why am I watching this if I could watch it for free?
Yeah.
You know, and like, now watch our movie. You know, that's pretty great. Right.
Supposedly Harry Shearer loves the Itchy and Scratchy bits the best.
Well, and man, the Simpsons does that so well of having the pop culture and like serving it up, and like even if you're not aware of what it's parodying exactly, like, you know, it could also be a way for you as the audience to you know, sort of explore that, you know, later on or whatever, discover like these Kubrick movies that they're referencing or whatever it is.
There was one, I have a great example of that. There was, I think it's from season 3, and they parodied the show The Prisoner. And and I had never seen The Prisoner, and I went and watched all of those The Prisoner show, and I was like, holy shit, there really is a ball that comes and like traps people, you know, like a big bubble. And I thought that was a joke. Yeah. And they didn't. Again, it was great parody. You know?
One of the things that so I've gotten the chance to have some breakfasts with Tim Long, who's been on the season, been on The Simpsons for 12 to 15 seasons now. The early stuff, especially, they weren't afraid of specifics. If they were going to, you know, use a movie for a joke that maybe nobody had seen, it still would be funny. And I think that's ultimately what makes even like Lost in America so funny. The specifics of the corporate world definitely help carry the movie for sure. I would say that like,
or even the specifics of Easy Rider, like you don't even have to have seen Easy Rider to
exactly.
Yeah, like the cop. Yeah, he blew their brains out. That was great. But like, even like, I mean, like, I know we're kind of talking more so about the show, but the movie itself does have a James L. Brooks heart to it. I would say, you know, if you've ever seen Broadcast News or Terms of Endearment, like, they have this feeling that it feels real, but you're connected to these people. And I would say that obviously The Simpsons is a cartoon and it has cartoon effects, and Homer Simpson is flying through the air at the very end. I think it does a pretty good job of straddling what fans want and what a 13 and under audience want in an animated movie that just their parents took them to. And I think that's tough to do. I think that, you know, I don't think we really even value that now with movie making. It's either established property that's a comic book, an action movie, or a kids movie. So it's like the PG-13 movies or like the $40 million romantic comedy is kind of dead. It's kind of moved to what streaming services show. Like A Marriage Story is on Netflix. Like you don't really see that in theaters. So it's definitely an interesting movie that I'm not sure how many other PG-13 animated movies have come out since have hit that well without being an established brand.
Right.
I mean, this was definitely an established brand, but yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's like, they're in that weird zone that doesn't get made anymore.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's like it costs too much to be an indie,
right?
And it doesn't cost enough to be
You're
a
in that
tentpole.
weird zone that doesn't get made.
I mean, even there were stories that came out that they're cutting salaries for the voice actors. Like, why? It's like because somebody in accounting thought they could get away with it. It's like it's an established brand that's worth millions, and they thought, well, we'll just cut. Which is a shame because we've kind of reached a point in Hollywood where it's analytics producing as opposed to like we don't have rebel filmmakers anymore of any type of person. We kind of have executives on set that ensure the scenes are shot. And like anytime a filmmaker seems to like have a creative vision, it seems like they're an asshole. And it's like I feel like that's the way we've branded the filmmaker now.
Isn't that when you all of a sudden get a trade headline that says something of the something like, oh, they left because of creative difference?
Yeah.
But that's how it's always put. But it's like,
it's always the euphemism. Yeah, exactly.
He came with his own, or he or she came with their own idea. That's what you're saying, right? And the studio didn't like it.
They tried to say no to an executive's stupid.
Do the same thing that you did in the first movie exactly. Well, no, we want to change it up. Well, then it's not a sequel. You're not going to get the money.
Like even if you're like watching movies that are like from like the 70s or 80s, even the like older movies than that, like you'll see like an experimental shot or something in terms of a camera movement or a character choice, and you're like, wait, how did they get away with that? Because usually it's just standard coverage or something like a movie like Harvey, the movie where there's an imaginary rabbit. How did they get away with that? Yeah.
We actually have an episode on imaginary friends. You can check us out. I believe it's episode 2. Was that right?
6.
Or 3? 6? Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah.
Harvey actually had some pretty cool shots, like some experimental stuff in there.
Although the Simpsons movie did show Bart's dick, so that
on Disney
that was
Plus. I want to add that this is the only penis that's on Disney Plus, and I would guarantee it, unless it's some animal show.
I remember watching that at the time and thinking like that was unnecessary.
I agree. But I did like the joke because like
I like the visual joke of it going through. Yeah.
The visual joke is like they keep like finding out the craziest way to obscure it, and then like psych. Here it is.
And they leave it on for a while too, and it like goes with an interlude of the song. It's really funny. Come on, kid. We all like to be naked in public.
I've gotten the chance to meet Nancy Cartwright. Very, very nice person. I met Yardley Smith, who's like I was introduced as an aspiring comedy writer to her, and she's like, "Well, I'm an aspiring voice actor. I still haven't figured it out." Mind you, this was like 3 years ago. So like very approachable
been
people.
Doing it for 30 years, yeah.
30 years, yeah.
Yeah. Even Nancy Cartwright. So like this was at the table read I went to, like. She brought in Lego toys to sign for some charity. A Make-A-Wish kid came in. She's like 100% energy, wants to know your name. Like she met everybody in the room that came in to watch the table read that day. Didn't care. Just met everybody, shook their hand. It's hard to meet people that really enjoy their job or seemingly enjoy their job as much as I've seen Nancy Cartwright. And it's kind of like that passion and love for filmmaking or for the project they're on. You kind of see even in Young Frankenstein where it's like, these people are just bouncing. They're just cruising with each other and it's fun.
Yeah, these, I know Simpsons was probably a different creature to make, or a different movie to make. But I'm sure Young Frankenstein and Lost in America were just a blast to make, and being on set with those people, it had to have been one of the most fun parties you could have every day going into work.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say is Lost in America, I can't imagine that, like being in front of the camera, behind the camera, writing it. That must have been nuts. Like even for small stuff, like just acting and things gives you so much anxiety. I think that did wear on Albert Brooks at a certain point. I think he just likes being an actor and doing one thing.
He's a great actor. He has major range. Like you were saying, Drive earlier.
Yeah.
He was a real asshole in that movie, and he played it really well.
He apparently got that role because of the scene at the Hoover Dam.
was a real asshole in that scene.
Yeah.
They had all this cocaine.
Well, one thing that we didn't talk about too with Lost in America is the scene with Gary Marshall, which is underrated too.
Yeah.
Which apparently he did
In the casino?
way too many takes, like than needed, just to piss off Gary Marshall. So like, that's why Gary Marshall. Yeah, so Gary Marshall, like the takes they use, is like, is that so? Like it's just like.
The casino is our main means of income. Now, you're a nice guy. You make me laugh and everything. But our policy is we can't give your money back. I'm real sorry. Say goodbye to your wife. I got to go home.
I like at first he like thinks he's going to solve it. Gary Marshall thinks he's going to solve it immediately. And he's like, I understand you're going through a lot. The room is comped and your breakfast is comped. And that was like
Yeah. The Wayne Newton line too. It's like, I like Wayne Newton.
He just ran into a brick wall.
Yeah, he's like, it was a bad example. I shouldn't use Wayne Newton. You should never use someone that someone like might like.
The other thing is just nobody knows his advertising agency, but it's the biggest advertising agency in the world, and that's what I love personally because it's like, wait, so this is a non-essential job, my man. Like,
Oh God, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think we mentioned also Julie Haggerty. That's her name, correct?
Oh yes, yeah. From Airplane.
How extremely funny she is, and how she plays basically for most of the movie the exact opposite of Albert Brooks.
Yeah.
She is very calm, like very even keeled, and he is like a fucking fuse about to blow every time.
Yeah, I mean, well, she's always his counterweight. She's like the straight man to his, like, just complete bonkers, like,
that
personality.
soft voice she's got, it's just it's perfect.
It's a different type of anxiety too. It's a different type. It's like you can definitely sense the fear too, because like there's this thing where he's blowing up on her. She's like, can we go inside the RV? And like I know it's like there's something really frightening about that. It's like it increases the anxiety of the situation. Where it's like I know I screwed up and I don't know what we're gonna do.
But she was completely different when she was sitting at the blackjack, or when she had a craps table.
Yeah. Come on, 22.
Oh, so roulette. Yeah, she was playing roulette, and so but her face, like her eyes, she was a completely different person. Yeah, she nailed that. She's like, "What'd you lose? Everything. What? Everything.
How bad is it? She's down."
She's down. Yeah. That's when Gary Marshall comes out. He's like, "Come on, we need to talk a little bit."
Apparently she got that role because, anybody else apparently losing that much money might come off like an asshole, right? Like totally blowing all of their savings. But apparently Albert Brooks felt that she doing that wasn't as bad, so that way they could essentially repair their lives from there, at least go from there. Right. And there is a certain sense to it where it's like you kind of feel bad for her. She's clearly going through something, but also there is a frustration as a viewer, like, oh, she lost the nest egg. Like, what the hell?
Yeah,
and he didn't want you to hate her through the rest of the movie, right? So she was. She maintained the likable.
Absolutely. Even running away with Ogre from Revenge of the Nerds at a certain point, you kind of don't blame her. She just sticks her finger out.
Talk to you, bro.
I hate guys like you.
Ogre beats his ass, doesn't he?
He at least punches him. That's the thing, is like he does a great job of not rewarding himself for blowing up on his wife. He gets his ass kicked, he learns his lesson, and then they have to go from there. Which again goes back to sort of idea of like grounded like realism to it all. Like we don't want to reward Albert Brooks for being an asshole to his wife, and you don't really want her to get off without at least getting upset, like showing a little bit of anger. So I think it definitely mixes it well. It's like that push and pull of whose scene is this, I think, is really evident again in that scene.
I just love when they go to get those jobs and he ends up being that crossing guard and sitting in that little lawn chair. Just that image of him in that little lawn chair with the jacket on and the stop sign.
Just like fucking trashing him the whole time.
Yeah.
Those kids just bust his balls. Come here.
I love that shot of the car just pulling up. It's like, oh, that's what I wanted.
Yeah.
There's leather.
But that was kind of that was the moment where he decided to go back and eat shit, right?
Yeah. I also like how that guy's in the middle of Arizona, but kind of has a little bit of a Brooklyn accent, like he's the manager.
Yeah. No, that's the Arizona accent.
Of course. Yeah, John McCain had it. Sure.
What are you doing? What is this interior? Leather?
Yeah, of course it's leather. It comes with the car. I think it is.
It's nice.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah, so I basically think that like the influence of the Brookses we featured today are definitely very evident in the comedy writers of today. Like, it's so interesting how at a certain point, because of like UCB and Groundlings and Second City and IO, people started to sort of major in comedy, and they sort of started studying from like SNL. But like if you kind of go back to like the work of Mel Brooks, and especially the work of Albert Brooks, I feel like is definitely overlooked for like somebody like a Woody Allen, because he had so many great movies that he's just more iconic. But if you go back and watch Albert Brooks, I think it's actually more applicable to comedy writing these days. And then with James L. Brooks, it's like basically you can write as dark as you want, as crazy as you want, but if you connect it back to relationships and a real meaning, you can kind of get away with telling a movie about anything. I mean, that's evident in Simpsons episodes in terms of endearment. Even broadcast news is if you're like looking for a lesser drugged network, like a softer drugged network, just do broadcast news instead, because
broadcast news is the gateway drug to network.
Yeah, like the idea that they actually aren't really that great of people, like, but they're you kind of connect with them, as opposed to network where it's just like, this is fucking dark and the world is fucked. Which I love too. But I think going back and like looking at these types of filmmakers and how they connect to writing scenes and the push and pull of scenes, and whose scene is this and how far can you take a bit and how do you construct it, I definitely think that's their influence on the better modern comedy writers and filmmakers.
Great. Jeremy, did you want to add anything like that?
Yeah, the only quick little thing I wanted to talk about was like that in the Simpsons movie, came out in 2007. In 2009, Stephen King published a book called Under the Dome, which then became a miniseries. Again with our buddy Hank.
Yeah.
He's Dean Norris just cannot not make an appearance in the show. And it's funny, like that there was a very small internet controversy at the time. This is how quaint internet controversies were in 2009, which is that like Stephen King must have ripped off the Simpsons movie to write this thing. And what's funny is like, he always like signs his books with like when he started writing to when it ended, and he started writing like sort of 6 months after the Simpsons movie came out. But supposedly this is his like third attempt to write it. He tried in 1978, got frustrated with it and quit. He then had a second attempt to write it in 1982 on the set of Creepshow. He got about 60 pages in and abandoned it as well.
Meteor shit.
Yeah. And he did an interview around that time where he talked about writing Under the Dome. Anyway, it's just like, it's one of those things where it's like something in the air, something in the ether, and happened to have a small town encased in some sort of dome.
But that's where the similarities end, right?
Exactly. It's pretty much that's just that. Although maybe Mayor Mo or whatever it is, Emperor Mo. Some of that, like some of the societal breakdown that was happening in Springfield, maybe you could find a very loose connection to. But anyway, it was just a type of zeitgeist, I guess, more so than I guess plagiarism. Which is what the internet controversy was about.
I guess the thing is that fits in line with the Simpsons did it. Internet fan culture. Simpsons did it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Or the Simpsons called it. Or...
Basically, exactly. The Simpsons just predicted that Stephen King was going to write this. So,
when some Simpsons writers, when I've sat down with Tim, he said I don't really like the Simpsons did it thing. Like some stuff is just like pretty but like some stuff is so brilliant with like Lisa becoming president in one of the episodes, and it's like, well, and President Trump or repairing what
president before her. Oh yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, there are some things that are fun to sort of bring up. Obviously, with internet culture, everything gets taken way too seriously, and then it gets ruined.
Yeah, I guess that's one way to sum up internet culture: taken way too seriously.
I was thinking that we go to New York as fast as we can.
And I eat shit?
Yeah.
My plan too.
All right. This was a fantastic episode. Next week, we will be celebrating the holiday season, the best way the Grindhouse Institute knows how, with some Christmas noir films, and that should be quite a bit of fun. And to take us through these films, we have a special guest joining us. And Jeremy, who's our special guest?
Yeah, our special guest is Alex Vlahov, who is runs one of the best Instagram accounts out there called Only Film Noir, and he actually was the one who turned me on to these movies. As a big film noir fan, I hadn't heard of at least two out of the three of them. So it'll be pretty exciting to dive into those. And what is it that we do best here is to always explore the dark side of things. And I guess our holiday special is no different.
I'm just glad we didn't put like Silent Night, Deadly Night in there, and any of the
I guess
Killer Christmas.
Oh yeah, Horror Christmas. So was it Black Christmas?
Yeah, that's a good one. That's one of my annual watches. Yeah. Either way,
we'd probably have to bring Michael back for that one because he says it's his favorite, like of all time.
Oh really?
So,
Oh, we'll have to figure that one out then.
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
We'll do like an Olivia de Havilland day and have that one on there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, Sam. This was a lot of fun. We really, really enjoyed watching these movies, and thanks for getting us out of the damn horror genre for a minute. Really appreciate that.
Mostly. I mean, in Frankenstein, I guess, kind of.
We still got to have a touch of horror.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next time we'll do Society and Holy Mountain, and we'll just get gruesome, dark, depressive shit, and we'll have Network in there, and it just after you watch it, you'll be like, okay, well, I'm done.
Well, actually, what wasn't your original pitch? Like, oh, we can do Society and Eyes Wide Shut.
Yeah.
Like, you got anything else?
Yeah. Look at how dark and creepy the upper 1% of the 1% is. Now they're a part of some sort of weird sex cult shunting thing.
So this is what Sam's plugging.
Yeah.
The sex cult.
I will be shunting at the Pasadena Ice House in December. December 7th and 15th. Come to the shunting.
So other than the shunting at the Ice House, anything else going on in your life?
Yeah, just posting tons of jokes and submitting out right now. It's very tough, obviously, with quarantine and COVID to kind of get out the normal stuff. So you can definitely follow me on Twitter, which is @Sam Kimbrell. I have an Instagram account, which is the same handle. Just posting jokes, shooting short films and sketches and stupid videos and posting up online and submitting. So you can follow me online.
Awesome. And yeah, we've been following. Your stuff is getting funnier and funnier as you go along. So I'm really glad you stuck with that and keep doing it.
I've gotten better writers, and directors. Yeah.
Albert Brooks.
You got the budget
bumped
up a little bit there.
Yeah, I actually am having someone else play me, and that's why it's funny.
He does a great impression of you.
Yeah.
And the makeup is incredible.
In conclusion, it should be noted, give him an extra $1.
Thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms at the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps us to get noticed. So thank you so much, everybody. We will be back next week.
Ciao.
Wait! Where are you going? I was going to make espresso.